the story of a famous rock band that decided to take a sudden, last-minute gig with exceptionally high pay. It was at this event that they encountered a horrifying incident that none of the band members will ever forget. Before we dive into our scary story, we would like to ask everyone to like and subscribe to support us in continuing to bring you more terrifying tales in the future. This incident happened about 15 years ago, during a time when Nicholas, a member of a popular indie rock band, was at the height of fame. The band had just released an album that became a major hit, making it difficult to book them without reserving a slot 2 to 3 months in advance. As nearly 2 years passed, the band's live performance jobs began to dwindle, and their popularity started to wane, making it easier to book them for events. One day, Theo, the band's manager, informed Nicholas about a high-paying job at a club in the South. However, Theo had only just received the request, and the event was scheduled for the following night. Despite the short notice, Theo asked if they were interested in taking the job. Nicholas, considering they were free the next day, responded, "Okay, sure. It's a high-paying job, just one night, and it's not too far from where we are now. We can drive there in 2 to 3 hours." After agreeing and hanging up the phone, Nicholas called other bands he knew to check if they were familiar with the venue and if there was indeed an event the next day. The other bands confirmed, saying, "Yes, there's an event there tomorrow. Our friends are also going to play there at 8 p.m. We'll probably see you there." With the assurance that the job was legitimate, Nicholas called his bandmates to inform them about the urgent, high-paying job the next day. He mentioned that they would need to travel separately since their usual driver was unavailable. Everyone agreed without any issues. The next day, Nicholas and Theo drove to the venue, departing in the afternoon and arriving around 4 to 5 p.m. Upon reaching their destination, they found that the club was not on a main road or in a city center like most clubs, but rather deep inside a remote alley. It was so secluded that it was surprising to find a club there. After driving for a while, they saw a community area and an old 10-story hotel. Next to the hotel were 3 commercial buildings that looked like restaurants, and beside them was the entertainment venue hosting the event, a medium-sized club with about 500 tables. Nicholas and Theo realized this was the place and got out of the car, seeing several people preparing the club's exterior. Nicholas asked to go inside to prepare for a sound check. Inside, the club was typical, with tables filling the space, a DJ booth at the back, a stage at the front, and seating in the middle. Nicholas and Theo began their sound check, and soon the rest of the band arrived, completing the setup by around 5 to 6 p.m. At that moment, Theo whispered to Nicholas, "Doesn't this place feel strange?" Nicholas asked why, and Theo responded, "Look at all these tables, but there are so few waitstaff." Nicholas noticed there were indeed hundreds of tables, but only about 5 waitstaff working. He suggested, "Maybe the rest will come later. They might be on another shift." Time passed, and the band finished their sound check. The club owner then approached them, and everyone exchanged greetings. After a brief conversation, the owner handed Theo the contract, which he signed. Unusually, the owner transferred the full payment immediately, without waiting for the performance to end. He also mentioned, "If you're too tired after the job, you can stay at a hotel nearby. I've already booked rooms for you." This hotel turned out to be the 10-story one Nicholas had noticed earlier. The band decided it would be better to stay at the hotel rather than drive home late at night. Upon arriving at the hotel, they found the interior to be somewhat outdated but decent enough. The atmosphere was quite deserted, but Nicholas didn't mind, as it was better than driving back home. He informed the receptionist about their booking, and she handed over the keys, allowing them to choose their rooms as the entire floor was reserved for them for privacy. All the keys began with the number 6, indicating they were on the 6th floor. Nicholas and Theo, being the first to arrive, chose room 602, one of the first rooms on the floor. The receptionist mentioned, if you don't need a bellboy, once you're settled, there's a swimming pool and a fitness center on the 4th floor you can use. Nicholas and Theo took the elevator to the 6th floor. As soon as the elevator doors opened, they were greeted by a musty smell from the old carpeted hallway. They walked to room 602, which, unlike the usual arrangement where even-numbered rooms are opposite odd-numbered ones, was shifted to the next door. The door where room 602 should have been was missing and locked from the outside. Nicholas thought this might be a storage room, which was no big deal. He opened room 602 and started unpacking. Soon, the rest of the band arrived and asked Nicholas, "Why didn't you take the first room?" Nicholas explained, "This is the first room. That other one is probably a storage room." The band members then went to their respective rooms, except for Theo, who usually shared a room with Nicholas as his gaming partner. Nicholas organized his belongings and checked the room's amenities. He opened the curtains to see the view and noticed the 4th floor swimming pool, thinking, "I'll go for a swim after the job tonight." At around 8 p.m., the band was ready to perform at the club. When they arrived, Nicholas noticed it was unusually dark outside, with the club sign not lit. However, the event was clearly happening inside, with music playing and interior lights on. The PR staff and event organizers were busy. Curious, Nicholas asked a PR staff member, "Why is it so dark outside?" The PR replied, "Oh, the sign lights are on a timer. They'll turn on soon." Nicholas jokingly said, "We're not here on the wrong day, are we?" The PR replied, "No, the guests are here. They're inside." Then Nicholas and his bandmates walked inside. Inside the club, the tables were arranged around the area with food and drinks placed on them. But what was strange was that all the drinks had their caps opened, the sodas were poured into glasses, and the food was all ready to eat. Nicholas noticed that there were still only 5 servers. At the tables meant for hundreds of guests, there were a few people sitting, but very few, not more than 10. As they walked backstage, Nicholas asked Theo, "Doesn't this seem weird to you?" Theo replied, "It's really strange. Who hired us to play? They paid a lot, but there are barely any people here. And there are no staff to help us or handle backstage stuff." At that moment, everyone started looking at each other because they were beginning to feel uneasy. Besides, there was no one backstage except them. Theo then walked out to ask the PR outside, but quickly ran back in looking alarmed, saying, "Hey, we can't get out. The door's locked." Nicholas ran out to check and found that the front glass door was indeed locked. He told Theo to call the club owner. When the owner answered, he said something even stranger. "It's okay. I hired you to play, so play. If you don't, I'll sue." Theo, very confused, asked, "Play for whom?" The owner replied, "All the guests are inside. Just play. If you don't play, I'll have to sue you. Trust me, just play." Then he hung up. At that point, Theo tried to peek into the club and saw there were some guests, but not more than 10. Meanwhile, the servers had all disappeared. Everyone in the band began to feel uneasy. "I can't play, I really can't," one of the bandmates said. Nicholas asked why, and the bandmate replied, "Just look outside. None of the guests seem interested." Are they really here to watch us? But before the situation could escalate, Theo intervened. It's okay. I just spoke with the owner. If we don't play, he'll sue us because we signed a contract. The club closes at 1 a.m. We'll just play for a bit. Even though it felt strange, musicians have to play their music. Soon, the sound of instruments filled the air for the next 3 hours. As it neared 1 a.m., the entrance door was unlocked, and a staff member stood at the front. Theo, who was not on stage, quickly ran out and pulled one of the staff members to ask what was happening. The rest of the band followed him out. The staff member explained, it was a real event, but in the past, this club was very popular until a competitor opened nearby. They say the competitor used black magic against this place. So now, the owner, who invested a lot of money, didn't know what to do and consulted a shaman. The sorcerer suggested feeding the spirits. The staff member continued, feeding the spirits means placing dolls, in which the shaman had trapped spirits, around the venue where customers can't see them. Every month or year, they have to hold events like this to play music and throw parties for the spirits. Tonight, there were no real customers. Everyone in the club was a spirit being fed. At that moment, everyone in the band felt a shiver run down their spines. However, the pay was enough for them to not want to complain to the club owner. They just let it go, thinking it was all in the past. After the conversation, everyone returned to the hotel and started discussing the events at the club. The mood was more lighthearted and amusing since it was over, and they didn't even realize they had encountered spirits. The pay was good enough that no one held any grudges. They chatted for a while before everyone went to their rooms to pack. Nicholas and Theo continued drinking beer in their room. Once everyone had finished packing, they gathered in Nicholas's room for a drink, while some considered going for a swim to relax. After about half an hour of drinking, one of the band members mentioned feeling very tired, probably due to the long journey. He remembered there was a massage parlor downstairs and decided to go back to his room and call for a traditional masseur to relieve his fatigue. Another band member in Nicholas's room said he would go to his room for a moment to get something and then left. Nicholas and Theo continued drinking beer. About an hour later, they heard running sounds, as if someone ran past their door while shouting incoherently. Slightly tipsy, Nicholas slowly walked to the door to see who was running on their floor at this hour. But when he opened the door, he found no one. He closed the door to return to his drink, but as the door was closing, he heard the running sound again. Nicholas quickly opened the door again, but saw no one. Confused, he muttered to himself, "What the heck?" and closed the door to sit and drink with Theo again. Theo, quite drunk himself, asked, "Who was running?" Nicholas slumped into his chair, picked up his beer glass and said, "No one. Everything's normal outside. Probably just noise from the upper or lower floors." They then continued their conversation as if nothing had happened, typical of drunk people. Around 6 a.m., Nicholas, who had dozed off in his chair, was startled awake when Theo, looking terrified, shook him and said, "Nick, let's go home, quickly." Nicholas groggily replied, "Go home? It's not even morning yet." But Theo insisted, his voice urgent, "Trust me, get out of the room." At that moment, Nicholas began to sense something was wrong because Theo looked so serious. He nodded and followed Theo out of the room. When they reached downstairs, Nicholas and Theo found 3 of their bandmates already sitting there. Nicholas asked, "Hey, what happened?" The 2 friends took turns explaining what they had experienced. The first friend who had called for a masseuse indeed had one come up, a pretty woman in a red dress who started massaging him. He was lying face down while she massaged his back. After a while, the other friend who went to get something opened the door to the room and saw the woman in the red dress massaging his friend. However, she appeared swollen, greenish, and bruised like a corpse that had been dead for several days, and she turned and smiled at him. The friend who had just entered was terrified and ran downstairs. The one being massaged, seeing his friend's reaction, turned to speak to the woman, but was shocked to see she was indeed a bloated, decomposed corpse. He immediately ran out of the room and went downstairs. After hearing the story, Nicholas turned to Theo and asked, "Did you see a ghost too?" Theo said, "I woke up because I needed to pee, so I went to the bathroom. When I opened the bathroom door, I saw someone sitting on the toilet. At first, I thought it was you, but when I looked closely, it wasn't. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman because it looked like a decomposed corpse. I quickly closed the bathroom door and came to wake you up." Another friend shared his story. "I went down to the 4th floor where the pool area is. I saw a beautiful woman about to go for a swim. When she jumped into the pool, I quickly took off my shirt and jumped in too. But it turned out there was no water in the pool. It was an abandoned pool. The woman had vanished. Luckily, my head didn't hit the ground or I would have died. I scrambled to climb out and angrily went downstairs to confront the staff, but there was no one around. Shortly after that, the other two friends came running down too. As they were talking, the front door of the hotel opened, letting in the morning light, and a male staff member walked in. Nicholas rushed over to him angrily, asking why there were no staff around at 2 or 3 a.m. and what was going on in the hotel. Instead of being surprised by the guest's anger, the staff member looked at Nicholas calmly, as if he had heard this many times before, and replied, "Did you see the woman in the red dress? Well, she walks past the front desk every day at 2 or 3 a.m. If you were in my shoes, would you stay?" The staff member continued, "The woman in the red dress was a real masseuse. She was called to a foreign customer's room, but he attacked and killed her. She was murdered in room 602, the first room without a number, which has been sealed ever since. Since then, no staff stays at the front desk between 2 and 3 a.m. because she walks past and takes the elevator every day, as if she's still working." The male staff member added, "There are more stories. 3 women drowned in the hotel pool, though not on the same day. Even though there's no water in the pool, they still appear to swim there. There was also a female receptionist who was stabbed to death by her boyfriend right here at the counter. That's why I start my shift now when it's light out. So don't be angry with me. I'm just a person hired to work here,